Hey everybody, welcome to FF Uncensored. We are in episode 5 of 2025.
Are you just counting the weeks? Like we're 5 weeks into 2025, and so it's
No, we've done 5 episodes this year.
okay.
This is our 5th episode of the year.
And it's probably the 5th week of the year,
It probably is,
so that might be an
but
easy way to remember.
it might be. But I figured we never counted before, so now I'm going to count. So we'll
Yeah.
see how many episodes we get this year or whatever. I don't. So then we could really do some math and calculate and be like, this is how many episodes we've done because
There
we're
we
probably
go.
pretty close.
There we go. Well, welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about cardio or strength, which is better. It's a loaded subject, and because a lot of times people will fall into one camp or the other. Hey, like I lift weights, or hey, I'm a runner. Like which is better? Why should you do one versus the other? Usually the answer is it depends, and probably the answer is both. So we'll talk about some of the merits to each of them, and how to maybe incorporate them based upon what your goals are. Because maybe you need to lean one way, or maybe you need to lean the other way. But just not including one aspect of them is probably not the best idea. So let's just first define them. So if you had to define cardio for someone, how would you define that? Because that one's a little bit more nuanced than strength.
Sustained elevated heart rate. Because even if you were doing like a HIIT style training, your heart rate is still going to be higher than like 60% for the entirety of the session. Like you're never going to really recover to below that. So I'm going to give it some kind of heart rate, like sustaining your heart rate over 60% of your max for the entirety of the workout.
And if we talk about like the physiological functions that are happening, right? Cardiovascular, which is referring to your body's ability to pump blood and oxygen around your body, right? That's where our cardio comes from. And then many times we'll say cardiorespiratory. So we're adding in the lungs and an oxygen component to it. And so there's a couple things that we look at, right, from a cardio standpoint. At the high end, we look at what's called a VO2 max, which is your body's ability to utilize oxygen. The higher your VO2 max, the better basically the more in shape you are, right? There is a heavy genetic component to that. So the people that are going to be at the highest level of VO2 max are there because they have a much higher VO2 floor than you or I do, right? They're just genetic freaks. But everyone has the ability to improve their VO2 max, just like anything else. Another really good variable we look at with regards to cardiorespiratory is resting heart rate. So your resting heart rate when you're lying down, not moving for a couple minutes, that's a really good indicator on how well your system is operating. The lower, the better. And again, elite people, elite athletes, they're going to get really stupid low. I think Lance Armstrong's was in like the 30s, if not lower than that, at his resting. So for most people, if you're under 80, that's a good place to start. Most people that are training a little bit, you're probably going to get into the 50s and 60s.
All right.
So when we're talking about cardio, that's kind of what we're talking about from a physiological perspective, and much of it's going to be based around heart rate. Because heart rate, yes, when you strength train, your heart rate does go up, but it doesn't go up because it's sustained. It doesn't go up because of the increase in oxygen demand. It goes up because of the increase in blood pressure. So they're not the same. They're not the same. So this is where you get the people that are like, I'm going to get my cardio from weight training or strength training. Like, it doesn't actually work that way. And so, like, you're not getting the same thing because of the blood pressure changes.
You went so nerd so hard.
That's what it is.
So hard.
Like, it's not the same. So
no, I agree. It's totally not the same. So, I mean, it makes sense, but it's just you nerded really hard there.
Yeah, I just want to let the people know. I want them to know science behind it. So then on the other side of the spectrum, we have strength, right? Which is pretty easy to define.
Resistance training.
right?
Training that includes resistance.
Right. And so we're teaching the body how to recruit more, right, motor neurons to basically recruit more muscle. We're having the body increase lean mass, right? So we're having it create more muscle, right? That's kind of the strength end of things. And so a lot of people kind of like fall in one camp or the other, right? They're like, I lift weights 4 or 5 days a week. Oh, I do cardio 4 or 5 days a week. And so I think like step one is like, what is the goal, right?
Yep.
If you want to be an elite power lifter, what do?
You lift heavy things.
You lift a lot of weights, right? If you want to run a marathon, you should probably run a lot.
Run. Oh, I was like,
Yeah.
is this a trick question? You
No.
probably should do a little bit of strength training too if you're going to
But
run a marathon. But
you can be an
you know,
elite. You can be a really. You could run a marathon without doing any strength training,
oh, you could.
right? Like,
You could.
would it be optimal? Probably not. But like, you don't necessarily need one or the other. And honestly, probably one or the other isn't necessarily better. So here's some arguments, though. If we are starting to talk about longevity, okay, there is plenty of arguments and plenty of evidence that would say that cardiorespiratory fitness is more important than strength with longevity. A lot of the data around people that live the longest have the highest or they have strong VO2 maxes. So, is that causation, correlation, yada yada yada? I don't know. Would it be better to be strong and have sufficient muscle mass and have a good VO2 max? Probably, right? But looking just strictly at numbers, having a heart that moves oxygen around and utilizing oxygen really well by your tissues is a pretty important thing. So I think a lot of people, as they start to age, should be thinking about cardiorespiratory fitness as being a strong piece of their regimen,
Yep.
but not negate strength training.
Well, I mean, the research on strength training and capability and like your ability to live alone though is super high too. So like that's where the counter on the other side is going to be is like there's a lot that says like if you can't do these things, your ability to live alone decreases. Like so you need both. And the fact that you start losing muscle mass as you age is a big contributor. And I bet the people that run or have good heart rates and all of that kind of stuff, they have a certain amount of muscle on their body to be able to maintain, be able to do the task.
Right. So I mean, that's where a little bit you get into this like it's not a catch-22, but it's like if I am active and have a very high VO2 max, I probably live a lifestyle that helps me keep a little bit of muscle, right? Like I'm not just completely sedentary sitting around and then running marathons. Like that's probably not the case. And so they're able to maintain because there's like you made a good point about this losing muscle, that kind of stuff. The other thing too with strength training is you don't need as much to elicit a benefit or to get what you need out of strength training. So like 2 sessions a week is enough to be able to give your body the stimulus as long as those sessions are challenging enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
To give your body the stimulus to hang on to muscle. We don't need to be strength training 5 or 6 days a week. And I'll maybe have to pull up the slides from this, but we were recently out in Vegas, and Joel Jameson had some interesting slides around like number of times per week that were needed with different things, and like the 2 times a week of strength shows up in the research as being enough. Yes, you can get to 3 or 4, but they looked at like longevity, and it was more of like I'm trying to think. It was more like observational type studies where they're looking at like how many times a week are people doing things, how long are they living, yada yada yada. And there was definitely like a peak where doing more than I think it was like 3 days a week or something like that. I'll have to maybe pull up the slides for another episode, but like there wasn't any more benefit. after that, like to doing more strength training from a longevity standpoint. We're not talking about like this is about
Okay.
living longer. And so in the same thing, there was some stuff with cardio as well, because we like there is stuff too. Like more is not better. Like you want enough to create a stimulus to then get a response.
Sometimes more is just more. Like
Or
I think I use that
it could be
time
worse.
that
Like more can be
it really
worse.
it really can. More is just more, and more definitely isn't always better.
So they look at even like marathoners and their hearts and that kind of stuff, and they because they're putting in so much time, their hearts aren't actually as healthy as we think they should be because they're doing a lot of cardiorespiratory stuff because they're overstressing their heart, and like the body has to adapt to that, right? And it will create adaptations that may or may not be beneficial for living longer, type of stuff, right? So there is this kind of
Yeah.
Goldilocks sweet spot area, and I'll see if I can figure out the stuff that I can bring on another episode because it was some really interesting graphs on like
Okay.
dose dependent, like how much should we do? Because that's always a question of people, like how much should I do, right? And so for the vast majority of people, it's probably more than what you're doing now. Um, and am I getting my cardio respiratory stuff? Am I getting some strength stuff? You should probably be doing both of them. If I want to run 5Ks, marathons, I probably should lean a little bit more towards more volume on the cardiorespiratory standpoint, but not necessarily negate strength. If my focus is a little bit more on building muscle, building strength, I should probably err on a little bit more strength and a little less cardio. But again, not turning one off completely. So, very wishy washy answer for
It is such a
cardio and
wishy
strength.
washy. So with your own training, what is your ratio? How much cardio? How much strength do you do?
Yeah, so it's a really good question because like I'm in an interesting period right now of the year where I'm playing a lot of basketball, and so I'm playing in actual games twice a week, and then potentially in some like pickup stuff a third day of the week, and then also playing volleyball one night a week, and so fairly active from a movement standpoint. And basketball is there's a large cardiorespiratory like component to it. Like volleyball, not so much. Like that's just a lot of more plyometrics. You'll see little bits of being high, but I will in a basketball game that's intense. I will sustain a heart rate above 80% for much of the actual game, and so I'm getting a lot of stuff from that. And so right now I'm not actually doing a lot of additional VO2 max training or anything like that. I'll do a little bit of zone two if I have time of just going in, putting in 30 minutes at a low heart rate. But my goal now is getting in my strength sessions, but not having them interfere with my ability to run around on the basketball court. So a lot of that has actually changed where I'll actually strength train on the same days that I play. And much of my strength training is more around, call it nervous system activation. So lower volume, higher load, or higher speed. And it's more about just kind of ramping up the system and not trying to get like super sore from workouts. Because if I'm really sore, it's hard for me to run around on a basketball court. So that's kind of where. So if I had to look at my ratio right now, I'm probably doing more cardio than I am strength from just like a minute standpoint because I'm playing in basketball games that last 40, 50, 60 minutes. Um, but if I'm just in like a regular phase, then I'm looking at 3 strength workouts a week, kind of total body on all of them, and then my VO2s. I'm trying to hit 20 to 30 minutes in like a high intensity zone, 20 to 25 minutes in a medium intensity zone. And then I try to get my low intensity zone, but that's the one I'm not as diligent in because it's more of a time commitment thing because it's hours in that zone, right?
Yep.
So, what does yours look
Yep.
like currently?
So 3 strength workouts. I'm doing an upper body, lower body, full body split. So 3 strength days. And really just looked for something different. Which is why I'm not doing total body. So that's where we're at. My third day is a little more dynamic, so there's jumping and plyos and more of that kind of stuff in it for my full body day. And then cardio, I'm kind of living the zone 2 life. Like I am hitting my zone 2 every week. So I am taking the time, which for me is just a lot of walking and walking really fast and probably doing it in a weight vest so I can actually get my heart rate up, or maxing out the incline at the gym to
Are
do it.
you able to get your heart rate up loaded on a flat surface without running?
Mhm.
You're able to get into like the 140s,
Mm,
150s?
yeah, I can get into my zone 2. Are you surprised by that?
Yes.
I'm not aerobically, my aerobics is bad because I did not prioritize it for a long time. I can do some really good hit,
Right.
but my like slow and steady cardio is bad. But
Yeah.
I can run and be in zone 2 too. So,
Yeah. I have a heart. I can't, I don't know if I'm able to wear a pack and be in zone, have my heart rate high enough on a flat ground. Hills, yes, but flat ground, no.
yeah, I do all right.
But well, it's interesting. I mean, a piece of like that stuff too is finding the modalities that allow you to get your heart, because like with zone 2, when we talk about that, right? We are actually just talking about this at our last team meeting. You have to have a sustained heart rate within that zone for a period of time to get the benefit. So if I go out and just
Yes.
walk for 5 minutes, like that's good and it's good movement, but I'm not actually getting any physiological changes from that 5 minutes. So
Yeah.
the stuff I've heard, the stuff I've read is about 30 minutes is kind of that like minimum effective dose of holding your heart rate in that zone for that period of time to get the changes that you need in the heart, which is
Yeah.
essentially like creating a bigger, I don't know which chamber it is, but allowing you to push more blood out of the heart with every bump, with every beat of the heart. And you just don't get that with a short, like a 10-minute here, 10 minutes there.
Well, and that's why my zone 2s are so much longer, cuz it does take me a little bit to get there. So it probably takes me 15 minutes to get there and then
Right?
I'm still there. Yeah. So that's the problem. I'm walking outside. I don't have There are no hill options by me.
Can you shuffle jog?
Yeah, and I'll do some of that, and that's what I'll do sometimes to get up quicker. But I'll walk for an hour.
Yeah, right. If you have that,
So I have the time,
right,
so I don't worry too much about it because I know I'll hit that 40. I know that by the 15-20 minute mark, I'll be getting like I have that
yeah,
40 to 45 minutes that I can be able to do it, or a little longer in some cases. If I'm jammed on time, I'm usually at the gym and I'm going to use a bike, or I'm going to use the treadmill on an incline and all of, like I have all of that stuff.
right,
But if I'm at home, I have the time to do it.
right. And shuffle jogging, if you're loaded, depending on how heavy you're loaded, can be not the easiest on the joints. So, which makes sense.
Yeah, but I can leave my vest on my mailbox, which I love to do, and then I'll like jog or shuffle jog, and then I'll go back, I'll grab my vest and I'll put it on and I'll walk the rest.
Right.
Because once I can get myself elevated, I can get myself to stay elevated.
How much are you loading?
I about 15 pounds or so.
Okay, which is probably 10%.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. All right, cool. So, if you take anything away from today, it's there are no answers, and you are more confused than ever. And
No,
so,
the answer, I'm going to give you the answer since Trevor's going to be mean over there. The answer is that we probably all need more cardiovascular training. In all of the different varieties, from low heart rate for sustained periods of time, and then increasing your heart rate for more moderate or short, more explosive bursts. Um, but don't miss out on the strength training. And that is, I mean, like as things get warmer, everyone's like, oh, I'm going to walk more. I'll be outside more. I don't need strength training. What you need is probably 2 to 3 days a week of strength training, and then a very nice balance of getting a good amount of cardiovascular work. And finding yourself that sweet spot of where you feel your best. And to do that, it's optimally doing and moving and caring for your body 7 days of the week.
boom, I like it.
Anything else you want to add, coach?
No, I think that's sufficient. And usually it's like if you're a runner, add in some strength training. If you love the weight room, add in more cardio. Like it's typically like what you're currently doing or really like doing, do the opposite or add in a little bit more of the opposite. If you're really thinking about living longer and making that a priority, definitely starting some cardio and making that making that a focal point of your week to get that stuff in. So,
And there's our feedback.
boom.
Get moving, guys. Bye.